What being a spectator at the Roman Colosseum was like, the Colosseum awakens, the year is 80 AD, and the eternal city of Rome is alive with anticipation. The Colosseum, still new in its glory, stands as the centerpiece of Roman pride. Its stones gleam beneath the morning sun, and the air hums with the footsteps of thousands of citizens making their way toward the grand amphitheater. To be a spectator at the Colosseum was not merely to watch a show. It was to become part of a ritual of spectacle, blood, honor, and entertainment. People of all classes, from the richest senators to the poorest plebeians, streamed into the vast oval structure. Each step echoed with the murmur of voices, the clink of sandals on stone, and the rustling of togas. The streets surrounding the Colosseum were already crowded. Merchants called out, offering fresh figs, roasted nuts, and honey cakes, their voices rising above the low hum of the gathering masses. Sellers of cheap wine poured clay cups for those eager to drink before the games began. Children tugged at the hands of their parents, eyes wide with excitement. Old men leaned on their walking sticks, remembering past spectacles, eager to see how today might surpass them. The Colosseum itself loomed like a mountain of marble and stone, its arches stacked in orderly rows, each one filled with movement. Flags fluttered above, and statues of gods and emperors watched silently over the throng. For many, stepping inside was a journey into another world, a world where the normal rules of life seemed suspended, where cruelty could be cheered, where death could be celebrated, and where the might of Rome was on full display. As the gates creaked open, the flow of humanity surged forward. Spectators clutched their wooden tesserae, small tickets that marked their place. The Roman system of seating was strict. The elite had the best view. The poor were pushed high into the upper tiers, and the slaves and women were confined to the distant edges. Yet, whether seated in the marble boxes close to the action or on the hard stone benches far above, everyone felt the same thrill. The morning light filtered into the corridors of the Colosseum, casting long shadows on the walls. The cool stone underfoot contrasted with the warmth of the crowd pressing forward. Guards in polished armor stood watch, their spears gleaming. At the entrances, ushers directed people to their assigned sections, their voices blending with the din of footsteps and chatter. Inside, the amphitheater revealed its true majesty. The arena stretched wide and open, covered in sand that would soon drink the blood of beasts and men. Beneath the arena floor lay a labyrinth of chambers, cages, and pulleys where gladiators prepared, where animals roared in darkness, and where executioners waited for their turn. But for now, the arena was still. The only sound was the murmuring of the crowd as they filled the seats. The anticipation was electric, yet hushed, like the breath held before a storm. To sit in the Colosseum was to sit inside the beating heart of Rome itself. The emperor would be there soon, the games would begin, and history, both brutal and magnificent, would unfold before their eyes. The approach to the Colosseum was itself part of the experience. Imagine the winding streets of Rome, bustling with people, carts, and animals. The smell of bread from nearby bakeries mixed with the sharper odor of fish stalls and the tang of spilled wine on stone pavements. Vendors shouted the virtues of their wares in competing voices, each trying to rise above the other. Dates from the east! Fresh olives, fine cloaks for the games. The chorus of merchants created a rhythm that guided the crowd forward, step by step, toward the shining arena. For the ordinary Roman, attending the games was not only about entertainment. It was also about belonging. It was a day when rich and poor alike participated in a common ritual. Though they sat apart in carefully ranked tiers, they shared the same sun, the same air, and the same excitement. Rome was an empire of hierarchy. But in the Colosseum, everyone in their own way was bound together by spectacle. The building itself was breathtaking. Even before one entered, the Colosseum towered above, dwarfing the people below. Its arches framed the sky like giant windows. Statues of gods and emperors seemed to watch over the crowd, cold and immovable. The stones of the amphitheater were pale, some surfaces smooth from years of polishing by wind and touch, Others still sharp and new, the mark of recent construction. For many, it was the largest structure they had ever seen, a marvel of engineering, built with the sweat of thousands of laborers and the vision of emperors who wanted to leave their mark on eternity. As spectators filed closer, they began to feel the power of the Colosseum's order. Rome was a city of rules, and the games reflected that. The tesserae, the small ticketing tokens, dictated exactly where each person would sit. A senator, draped in a fine white toga with a purple stripe, would glide confidently to the lower rows, where cushions softened the marble. A merchant with a successful business might sit higher, still proud to be near the center of Rome's social life. A poor farmer, his hands calloused from labor, would climb to the highest levels, where the air was thin and the seats hard, but where he could still claim that he had seen the games. Inside, the architecture guided the movement of thousands. Corridors stretched like veins through the body of the structure. Arched passageways opened into staircases, each leading to a precise section of seats. The Romans had mastered the art of managing crowds. The Colosseum was proof. Guards stood at intervals, their eyes sharp, their stances rigid. Order was essential, for within these walls 50,000 souls would soon gather. And the difference between harmony and chaos was the discipline of Rome itself. The moment of stepping inside for the first time was overwhelming. From the shadowed corridor, one would emerge into sudden sunlight, and the arena would spread out before them like an endless stage. The oval shape gave every seat a view, the symmetry of its design a comfort to the eyes. The floor of the arena, covered in golden sand, glowed beneath the morning sun. That sand had been carefully chosen, brought in to absorb the blood that would soon be spilled. For now it looked clean, quiet, waiting. Around the rim of the arena, officials prepared. Some carried long poles for managing animals. Others arranged props and equipment for later performances. Beneath the floor, in the hypogeum, unseen by the audience, workers tended to cages of lions, bears, and leopards. The muffled growl of beasts echoed faintly through the wooden trapdoors. For those sitting close enough, the faint smell of straw and animal musk hinted at the drama to come. The crowd settled slowly, like waves folding onto a shore. Friends greeted each other with handshakes and laughter. Strangers compared their expectations for the day, which gladiator might triumph, which beast might surprise the crowd, which performer might fail. The hum of conversation rose and fell, in uneven rhythm blending into a single, endless murmur. High above, pigeons circled lazily, as if indifferent to the human frenzy below. As more seats filled, hawkers moved through the aisles, balancing trays of bread, olives, cheese, and watered wine. Their calls punctuated the chatter. Children darted through gaps, their sandals slapping against stone steps. Some carried small wooden toys, gladiators carved crudely from scraps of wood, which they clashed together in mock battles while their parents tried to keep them seated. The anticipation was unlike any other feeling. For the Romans, this was not merely a diversion, it was a lesson in power. Every stone of the Colosseum spoke of empire, of conquest, of the emperor's ability to command life and death. To watch the games was to be reminded of what it meant to be Roman, to rule, to dominate, to cheer in unison for victory. And yet, beneath the grandeur there was something deeply human, the excitement of a crowd, the love of spectacle, the desire to see something unforgettable. The Colosseum, with all its cruelty and magnificence, was also a mirror. It reflected the people, their hunger for stories, their fascination with danger, their need to be part of something larger than themselves. The sun climbed higher. Shadows shortened. The arena was nearly full. All that remained was for the emperor to arrive. When he did, the games would begin, and the quiet anticipation would break into a roar heard across the city. But for now, in these final moments before the spectacle, the Colosseum itself seemed to breathe, a giant of stone and sound, alive with expectation. The crowd's murmur reached a restless peak as a sudden shift in attention rippled through the tiers. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. A hush, brief but noticeable, spread like a chill across the amphitheater. The emperor was Arriving from the grand northern entrance, the imperial entourage appeared. Gilded standards held high, catching the sunlight with a flash. Trumpets blared, their notes sharp, echoing off the marble. The sound was not music but proclamation, a signal that power had entered the arena. The guards moved with mechanical precision, their armor gleaming, shields reflecting the glare of day. And there, in the midst of them, the emperor himself appeared. Draped in purple and gold, he seemed both human and divine, a living symbol of Rome's unbroken rule. For the crowd, his presence was everything. To see him in the flesh, to be under his gaze, was proof of their place in the empire. Some shouted his name, others bowed their heads, but all eyes were fixed upon him. As he took his seat in the pulviner, the imperial box, the hush gave way to thunder. The crowd erupted, thousands of voices joining as one, a roar that shook the very stones. It was not applause in the modern sense. It was affirmation, a declaration that Rome's heart beat through its emperor. The emperor raised his hand in acknowledgement, a simple gesture that carried the weight of dominion. With his arrival, the games could begin. The first spectacle was often ceremonial, a grand procession known as the Pampa. Through the massive gates at ground level, lines of participants streamed into the arena. Priests in white robes carried sacred objects, their solemn faces lit by the sun. Charioteers guided horses adorned with colored ribbons, their hooves stirring the sand. Gladiators followed, walking in ordered groups, their weapons gleaming, their armor polished to brilliance. Behind them came exotic animals, elephants draped in cloth of red and gold, camels with jangling bells, ostriches pecking nervously at the ground. These creatures were more than curiosities. They were proof of Rome's reach. Each animal had traveled from far lands conquered or subdued, symbols of the empire's vast dominion. The crowd marveled, pointing, whispering, some seeing such beasts. For the first time in their lives, the climax of the procession was the display of the day's instruments of war and execution. Nets, tridents, curved swords, and spears were carried high. Wooden models of siege engines rolled forward, reminders of Rome's power to conquer not only beasts but men and cities. The crowd cheered wildly, for these tools promised both entertainment and blood. When the Pampa ended, silence fell again. The arena floor was cleared, the sand raked smooth. The emperor gave a signal, subtle yet absolute, and the first contest began. At first, the games often opened with venations, the hunting of animals. A trapdoor creaked, and with a rush of air, it opened. From the dark below, a lion sprang upward, its muscles coiled, its roar piercing the arena. The sound silenced even the most boisterous voices. The beast circled, tail twitching, eyes darting toward the crowd as though it knew it was being watched. Then another gate opened, and a hunter stepped forward, not a gladiator, but a specialist in these spectacles. Armed with spear and shield, dressed in light armor, he faced the lion with a steady gaze. The crowd leaned forward, hearts pounding. Some whispered prayers to gods for the man's survival. Others perhaps quietly rooted for the beast. The contest unfolded slowly. The lion prowled, muscles rippling under tawny fur. The hunter advanced cautiously, shield raised. A sudden charge, sand flew, claws slashed, the man braced. Gasps echoed through the tiers. The hunter's spear struck, grazing the beast's flank. Blood stained the sand, the first of the day. Cheers erupted, but the lion was not done. With a snarl, it lunged again, knocking the man backward. For a heartbeat, the crowd thought it over. Yet he rolled, recovered, and drove his spear deep. The beast collapsed, shuddering, then lay still. The arena exploded with sound. Some cheered in relief, others in awe. The smell of blood mingled with dust and sweat, filling the air. For the crowd, it was more than a fight. It was Rome's dominion over nature itself, a reminder that the empire bent not only men but beasts to its will. More animals followed, leopards leaping with shocking speed, bears swatting aside spears with terrifying force, even rhinoceroses, their horns gleaming, charging with unstoppable power. Each contest carried its own tension, its own drama, its own release. And each death stained the sand a deeper red dot as the hours passed. The game shifted. Music drifted across the arena, pipes and drums, their rhythm steady, hypnotic. Acrobats performed between hunts, their bodies twisting high in the air, drawing gasps of wonder. Dancers in bright costumes moved in patterns, their steps a fleeting beauty before the next act of violence. The crowd, for all its thirst for blood, also delighted in such diversions. The Colosseum was not merely a place of death. It was a theater, a stage where every emotion could be drawn forth. Awe, laughter, horror, relief. Yet everyone knew what they awaited most: the gladiators. Their appearance would mark the true heart of the day. Until then, the crowd endured the preludes, restless, eager, the anticipation of fire that burned hotter with each passing hour. Above them all, the emperor watched. For him, too, this was theater, not only of entertainment but of politics. Each cheer, each gasp, each chant was a reflection of his power. In the Colosseum, he was not only ruler but performer, orchestrator of the grandest spectacle on earth. And as the sun arced across the sky, shadows shifting over marble tiers, the stage was prepared for the moment all had come to see. The gladiators would soon enter, as the morning light crested higher over the Colosseum. The murmuring crowd shifted, senses sharpening with anticipation. The time had come for the gladiators to enter the arena, men trained not only in combat but in showmanship, whose every movement was scrutinized by thousands of eyes from the shadowed corridors beneath the arena. A faint rustle began. It was the collective shuffle of feet on wooden floors, the metallic clink of armor, and the soft exhalation of men preparing for what awaited them. These were no ordinary fighters. Some were seasoned veterans, their bodies scarred and lean, honed to perfect precision. Others were novices, trembling at the sight of the vast amphitheater and the expectant crowd above. The first gates opened with a low, creaking groan. A shaft of sunlight fell across the hypogeum, illuminating the polished faces of the men who would soon entertain, terrify, and inspire. The spectators leaned forward as if proximity could bring them closer to the action. Children pressed against the railings, wide-eyed, while older citizens adjusted their seats to get the best view. As the gladiators stepped into the arena, a hush swept through the crowd, quickly replaced by murmurs of recognition and speculation. Their armor gleamed in the morning sun, bronze helmets, chest plates polished to perfection, shields embossed with intricate designs. Weapons hung from their belts, swords, tridents, daggers, and spears, each one a symbol of skill and death. Some gladiators were paired in matchups for combat. They exchanged brief glances, nods of silent understanding. There was no conversation. Words were unnecessary here. The crowd sensed the tension. They were about to witness skill honed through years of discipline, lives forged in the crucible of the training schools and perhaps live soon to be lost. The arena floor, raked smooth, bore the marks of countless battles before. The sand, now warm beneath the sun, awaited the imprint of leather sandals and the occasional drop of blood. Every step, every shuffle, every movement would leave a trace, a fleeting reminder of the human drama unfolding. Above them, the emperor's gaze was fixed. He raised a hand, and the signal rippled through the amphitheater. A drum rolled once, a trumpet blared, and the games began. The first clash was ceremonial, a demonstration of technique and prowess. Swords clanged lightly against shields. Tridents struck at the sand. The movements were precise, almost dance-like, yet the audience could feel the danger lurking in each strike. A misstep could be fatal, and that knowledge heightened the thrill. The crowd reacted in waves. Gasps, cheers, applause, and murmurs mixed into a continuous hum. Even those high in the upper tiers, far from the arena floor, felt the vibration of collective emotion. The Colosseum itself seemed alive, echoing every sound, amplifying every reaction. Soon the matches became more intense. Gladiators lunged, parried, and struck with skill. The sand shifted underfoot, kicking up faint clouds that caught the light. The metallic scent of weapons mingled with the earthy aroma of the arena floor and the subtle hints of sweat and dust from both combatants and spectators. The air was thick with tension, yet strangely hypnotic. Children clutched their parents' hands, some covering their eyes briefly, only to peek again in fascination. Merchants called out from the aisles, selling refreshments to those who had yet to settle into the rhythm of the spectacle. Old men nodded knowingly, recognizing techniques and stances honed in their youth or observed in previous games. Between combats, smaller diversions were introduced. Dancers moved across the sand, their bodies in intricate patterns, offering moments of beauty and contrast to the harshness of the fights. Musicians played pipes and drums, their rhythm punctuating the rise and fall of tension. Even in the midst of violence, the Colosseum offered a theater of artistry, a combination of spectacle and skill designed to captivate every sense. As the day progressed, the games escalated. New challenges appeared, pairs of gladiators with varying weapons, battles against animals released from hidden cages, and sudden duels arranged by the emperor himself to test courage and strategy. The spectators' reactions grew more fervent, their voices rising and falling like tides in response to every blow, every dodge, every victorious strike. The sun climbed toward noon, casting shifting shadows across the arena floor. Light danced across shields, armor, and polished helmets, highlighting every detail of combat. From high above, the audience could see patterns forming in the sand, tracks left by warriors and animals alike, a living map of the unfolding drama. The emperor occasionally nodded, smiled faintly, or gestured, and the crowd mirrored his reactions. Approval or disapproval from the imperial box was decisive. It could determine the fate of a gladiator, the outcome of a match, or the flow of the spectacle. The emperor's presence was a constant reminder that life and death in the arena were both entertainment and statement, a testament to Rome's authority. As the afternoon wore on, fatigue set in, yet the excitement remained. Gladiators rested, briefly exchanging advice or catching their breath, while spectators leaned back, sipped wine, and murmured predictions about the next match. The Colosseum maintained its hypnotic rhythm, a cycle of tension and release, danger and relief. Spectacle and awe. By late afternoon, the most celebrated gladiators entered the arena. These men were known throughout the city, legends whose skill had saved them in countless battles. The crowd responded with ecstatic cheers, hats and cloaks thrown into the air, children waving wooden swords in imitation. Every movement was analyzed, every strike applauded, even as the sun dipped lower, casting longer shadows across the tiers. The energy did not wane. The Colosseum seemed to glow with its own internal light, fueled by thousands of spectators and their shared experience. The combination of architectural mastery, human skill, and collective emotion created a scene unlike any other in the known world. And when the final match of the day began, with gladiators who had already survived many contests, the audience felt the tension in every fiber. The sand shimmered faintly with the sweat and dust of battle, the scent of exertion and anticipation filling the air. Every eye was focused, every breath held. The Colosseum was more than stone and sand. It was alive, breathing through the emotions of those who occupied it. A vessel of human drama suspended in time. As evening approached, the games would draw to a close, but for now, the Colosseum pulsed with life, danger, and spectacle, a world where the line between fear and fascination blurred, where every spectator was both witness and participant in the grandeur of Rome. As the sun arced toward its zenith, the arena seemed to transform. Shadows shifted across the sand, stretching and contracting with the movement of the audience above. The crowd had settled into a rhythm, alternating between murmurs of anticipation, gasps of awe, and bursts of cheering. The early hunts and introductory matches had warmed the Colosseum, but now, the most dramatic spectacles were about to unfold. From beneath the arena, hidden trapdoors whispered open. The scent of the hypogeum rose faintly, mingling with the warmer air of the upper tiers. This was the stage of the grim and the terrifying, the place where executions, punishments, and dangerous contests would capture the full attention of the spectators. The Romans had a unique fascination with the balance of life and death, and the afternoon games were designed to satisfy it fully. The first act involved criminals condemned for crimes ranging from theft to treason. They were not gladiators, but men and women forced into the arena to meet their fate. They entered under guard, their faces pale, their eyes wide with fear. Some whispered prayers to gods or pleaded silently with the emperor. Others walked with resignation. Accepting the end that had been chosen for them, the audience reacted with a mixture of curiosity and excitement. Some leaned forward, trying to catch a glimpse of the condemned before fate struck. Others whispered among themselves, discussing previous games, past executions, and the morality of spectacle. The Colosseum, even in these darker moments, served as a mirror to Roman society, a place where ethics, entertainment, and politics intersected. The condemned were brought to the center of the arena, where various forms of punishment awaited. Some faced wild animals, lions, leopards, and bears, released from hidden cages. The creatures lunged, roared, and circled their prey with terrifying speed. The spectators gasped collectively, some shielding their eyes, others leaning closer. In morbid fascination, every strike of claw and tooth, every leap and fall, was witnessed by thousands. The sand beneath the arena absorbed it all, the fine grains drinking both fear and blood alike. Other condemned were executed by human hands, trained men wielding swords, tridents, or spears, performing with precision born of experience. The audience watched closely, recognizing skill and technique even in these grim displays. Every movement was deliberate, choreographed, almost ceremonial. Though death was imminent, the executioners carried out their task with a calm, professional grace between these grim spectacles. The Colosseum offered moments of respite, carefully timed entertainments designed to soothe and delight the crowd. Acrobats flipped and twisted across the sand, their bodies performing feats of balance and strength. Dancers moved in intricate patterns, their colorful garments creating flowing mosaics of motion. Musicians played soft interludes, their instruments, weaving gentle rhythms that contrasted with the harshness of combat. These interludes allowed the spectators to breathe, to absorb the atmosphere, and to prepare for the next act of drama. The afternoon also introduced mock battles, reenactments of famous Roman victories, staged with precision and artistry. Soldiers, sometimes gladiators, sometimes actors, reenacted the strategies and heroics of Rome's military past. The crowd cheered for victories and groaned at defeats, though all knew the outcomes were predetermined. These performances connected the games to Roman identity, reminding spectators of the power and glory of their empire. Meanwhile, the gladiators rested, shared water, and whispered advice to one another. Their eyes scanned the arena, noting the expressions of the crowd, the gestures of the emperor, the subtle shifts in sunlight across the sand. Even in downtime, the Colosseum demanded attention, an arena where every moment, every glance, and every movement was meaningful. As the sun began its descent, the energy of the crowd intensified once more. The final acts of the afternoon were approaching the pinnacle of the games, where skill, bravery, and luck would decide the fate of men. Gladiators armed with mismatched weapons faced each other in contests that tested adaptability, strategy, and sheer courage. The crowd leaned forward, hearts synchronized in anticipation. Every dodge, thrust, and parry elicited waves of gasps and applause. The emperor's attention was constant. A raised hand could spare a life, a lowered thumb could condemn. The audience watched for his cues, mimicking his judgments with collective energy. In this, the Colosseum became a living organism, pulsating with the emotions of tens of thousands of people, all participating in a ritual older than memory, a ritual where danger, skill, and spectacle fused into a single, unforgettable experience. The late afternoon light painted the arena in golden hues. Shadows stretched long across the sand, highlighting the movements of the gladiators and the patterns they left behind. The spectators, though tired, remained enthralled. They had been part of a world unlike any other, a world where life and death danced together, where fear and excitement merged, and where the glory of Rome was tangible in every stone, every cheer, every heartbeat. As the final afternoon match concluded, the crowd slowly began to adjust, murmuring among themselves about what they had witnessed. Conversations speculated about the skill of fighters, the behavior of animals, and the decisions of the emperor. Children recounted the feats of strength and bravery they had seen, their voices high with excitement. Adults reflected on the lessons of power, courage, and fate, some silently, some aloud. The Colosseum, though quieting slightly, still resonated with echoes, the clatter of weapons, the roar of animals, the murmur of thousands of spectators. It had been a day of drama, spectacle, and emotion, a day that would be remembered by all who witnessed it. And even as the light softened, painting the arena in fading gold, the anticipation lingered. The evening games, though not yet begun, promised further marvels, final duels, and the ultimate displays of skill and courage. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, shadows lengthened across the vast expanse of the arena. The Colosseum, which had been bright and buzzing with energy, now adopted a more solemn tone. Light played along the curves of the stone, turning the sand a warm amber, highlighting every footprint left by the gladiators, animals, and attendants of the day. The crowd, still vibrant, had grown attuned to the rhythm of the games. Their breaths synchronized with the tension and release of each contest. The evening duels were always the most anticipated. These were not introductory skirmishes or ceremonial displays. These were battles that tested every skill, every ounce of courage, and every strategy the gladiators had honed in training. The men entering now were seasoned warriors, their bodies marked by scars that told stories of survival and mastery. Some bore fresh wounds from earlier contests, yet they stood poised, ready to perform before the masses once more. A hush fell as the first of the evening combatants emerged. The crowd leaned forward, eyes widening, fingers gripping railings. Even those who had seen dozens of matches that day felt a thrill, a mixture of excitement, fear, and admiration, coursing through their veins. Every movement of the gladiators was deliberate. Every step was calculated, every glance measured. The audience watched as if time itself had slowed, hanging on to each swing of a sword and each careful dodge. The sun's descent made the Colosseum glow in golden-orange light, the stone arches casting long, dramatic shadows across the arena. The sand shimmered faintly, disturbed by the movement of men and beasts alike. From the upper tiers, spectators had a panoramic view, catching the patterns formed by the duels, arcs of motion, circles of retreat, sudden lunges that drew gasps and applause. Between duels, the crowd filled the air with their reactions. Children whispered among themselves, mimicking the gladiators' movements with small wooden swords. Adults discussed the tactics they observed, some in awe of the fighter's skill, others critical of missteps. The Colosseum was not just an arena of action. It was a forum for observation, analysis, and debate, even as the sun set and shadows lengthened. Occasionally, the emperor signaled with a subtle movement, and the spectators followed. A raised hand could spare a fallen gladiator, a lowered thumb could seal a fate. The crowd responded in unison, a living reflection of imperial authority. The rhythm of approval, tension, and suspense was like a pulse that echoed through every tier of the amphitheater. As the evening progressed, the duels grew more complex. Combatants wielded unfamiliar weapons or fought in unconventional pairings. Each duel tested adaptability, strength, and endurance. The arena became a stage for human drama in its most elemental form. Blood and sweat mingled with the sand, staining the arena a deeper red. While the faint aroma of exertion and tension filled the air, the Colosseum also provided moments of spectacle between duels. Acrobatics continued, with performers flipping and twisting gracefully across the sand. Dancers moved in elaborate patterns, their flowing garments catching the dimming light. Musicians maintained a soft rhythm, their pipes and drums punctuating the evening with steady cadence. These interludes allowed the audience brief respite, a chance to breathe, reflect, and prepare for the next act of intense combat. High above, pigeons flew lazily between the arches, indifferent to the drama below. Their shadows moved along the walls, blending with the growing darkness of the late afternoon. The contrast between life and death, freedom and constraint, was stark. The spectators absorbed it all: the thrill, the horror, the artistry, and the Colosseum became a vessel containing the full spectrum of human emotion. The evening duels culminated in the arrival of the most celebrated fighters, gladiators, whose fame had spread across Rome. The crowd rose in anticipation. Hats and cloaks were thrown into the air. Children waved wooden swords with mimicry of skill and bravery. Adults held their breath, keenly observing every feint, every strike, every dodge. These were men whose presence commanded attention, whose every movement told stories of survival, strategy, and courage. As darkness fell and torches were lit, casting flickering light across the arena, the final duels of the day began. The interplay of light and shadow added drama, emphasizing the sculpted movements of the combatants. The sand glistened faintly under torchlight, each grain reflecting subtle glimmers as if the arena itself were breathing. The spectators, now fully immersed, reacted to every nuance. A successful parry drew a cheer. A near miss caused collective gasps. Every swing of a sword, every shift in stance, every footfall resonated through the amphitheater. The Colosseum's architecture amplified sound and emotion, creating a hypnotic, almost dreamlike experience for those watching. Even as night deepened, the games continued. The rhythm of tension and release, danger and awe, spectacle and contemplation held the crowd entranced. The Colosseum, though ancient and imposing, seemed alive, a living stage where human skill, bravery, and emotion converged. By the end of the evening, the audience was both exhausted and exhilarated. Conversations lingered, recounting the feats witnessed, debating choices made by the emperor, analyzing victories and defeats. The Colosseum had not only entertained but shaped the perception of the empire, demonstrating the power, precision, and grandeur of Rome. And as the spectators slowly departed, the Colosseum stood silent, bathed in moonlight. Its arches cast long shadows across empty tiers. The sand, still warm from the day's events, carried the echoes of thousands of voices, of battles fought, of fear, awe, and admiration. For a moment, the arena seemed to breathe, reflecting back the energy and emotion of the day before settling into stillness for the night. When the final clash ended and the emperor's decision echoed through the Colosseum, the atmosphere shifted. What had been a thunderous sea of voices began to quiet, softening into murmurs, then to the gentle shuffle of thousands preparing to leave. The torches still burned, their flames flickering against the night, casting wavering shadows upon the arches. The once blazing roar of the crowd was now replaced by the steady hum of conversation, footsteps, and the faint creak of benches as spectators rose from their seats. The arena itself bore the scars of the day's spectacle. The sand was disturbed, patterned with footprints and the impressions of fallen bodies. It carried streaks of red, darker patches that would soon be raked over by attendants, smoothing the surface in preparation for the next day. Litter discarded food, empty cups, torn pieces of cloth scattered across the tiers, reminders of the humanity that had filled the stone bowl with such intensity only hours earlier. Spectators filed out slowly, guided by the archways and corridors that spiraled outward from the center. The Roman engineers had built the Colosseum not only for spectacle but for efficiency, and so the crowd moved in a remarkable order. Even tens of thousands of souls could exit within minutes, each arch marked and designed to disperse them back into the streets of Rome with ease. Families left together, children clutching their parents' hands, eyes heavy with exhaustion yet still wide with the images of gladiators and beasts seared into memory. Merchants packed up their stalls, gathering the last coins of the day, calling out softly to stragglers, offering discounted morsels before heading home. Senators and wealthy patrons lingered a little longer, discussing the day's outcomes, weighing the skill of particular fighters or whispering about imperial decisions. The streets outside the Colosseum, which had been relatively quiet during the games, now swelled with life. The glow of lamps illuminated groups of spectators walking together. Conversations filled the night air, praise for victorious gladiators, lament for the fallen, speculation about future contests. Taverns nearby buzzed with patrons eager to continue the night, to drink and retell the spectacles they had witnessed. each retelling colored by exaggeration, admiration, or dismay. For the common spectator, the walk home was a continuation of the experience. Some carried small souvenirs, fragments of wood, bits of cloth, or trinkets purchased from vendors, tokens of the day's excitement. Others carried only memories, vivid and lingering. The city itself seemed to echo the Colosseum's pulse, its streets alive with conversation and movement, its people bound together by the shared experience of Rome's greatest stage, yet not. All spectators left with joy. Some left with unease, troubled by the bloodshed, haunted by the faces of those who had fallen. The game stirred admiration, but also reflection. The sheer scale of life and death, of glory and suffering, pressed upon the minds of the more contemplative. The Colosseum was a mirror of the empire itself, powerful, awe-inspiring, and yet undeniably ruthless. Inside the arena, attendants worked quietly under torchlight. They cleared debris, tended to the wounded who had survived, and carried away those who had not. Animals were led back into their cages, their growls and restless movements echoing faintly through the tunnels. Gladiators, whether victorious or defeated, returned to their quarters. Some celebrated, others treated, and still others destined never to leave again. As the last spectators drifted away and silence began to reclaim the Colosseum, the great amphitheater stood as it always had, immense, unmoved, eternal. Its arches framed the night sky, the moonlight glinting against weathered stone. It seemed to breathe in the quiet, absorbing the echoes of the day. For the city of Rome, the Colosseum was more than entertainment. It was a unifying force, a demonstration of imperial might, and a reminder of the fragile line between life and death. To witness its games was to participate in the heartbeat of the empire itself, to be part of a tradition that blended spectacle with politics, art with brutality, glory with sorrow. So, the spectators dispersed into the night. Some sought rest in quiet homes. Others lingered in lively taverns. Many carried stories that would ripple outward, told and retold in markets, baths, and forums. The Colosseum, though silent now, had imprinted itself once again upon the soul of the city. By dawn, it would stand ready. Its walls, stained with memory, would soon welcome a new day of voices, roars, and spectacle. For Rome never ceased, and the Colosseum was its living heart. While the spectators drifted into the night, the men at the heart of the spectacle lived a very different rhythm. The Colosseum's silence after the crowd's departure was deceptive. Beneath the stone arches and through the hidden passageways, the world of the gladiators remained alive. It was a world of discipline, routine, and constant preparation. To the public, gladiators were symbols of courage, strength, and skill. But behind the scenes, they were men caught in a system that demanded endless sacrifice. The day for a gladiator often began before the sun rose. In the training schools known as ludi, strict order governed every moment. The clang of metal on wood, the grunt of exertion, and the sharp commands of trainers filled the air. The doctors, skilled veterans of the arena, drilled the men relentlessly. Wooden swords struck against posts, shields raised in practiced defense, footwork rehearsed again and again until movement became instinct. Sweat-soaked tunics, muscles ached, and yet the drills continued without pause. Diet and care were equally important. Contrary to popular imagination, gladiators were not starved or neglected. They were investments, carefully fed to maintain strength. Their meals often consisted of barley porridge, beans, dried fruit, and bread. Some accounts describe them as barley men, their diet intentionally designed to build a layer of fat that offered both energy and a degree of protection against cuts. They were given access to medical care as well, since an injured gladiator was a wasted resource. Physicians treated wounds, reset bones, and applied herbal remedies. The gladiator's body was his weapon, and it was maintained with precision. Beyond the drills and the meals, there was the weight of discipline. Life in the ludus was harsh. Punishments for disobedience were swift and severe. The men lived under constant watch, bound by the rules of their trainers and the authority of the lanista, the master who owned or managed them. Freedom was a distant hope, achievable only through years of victory and survival. Yet for many, freedom never came. Still, the life of a gladiator was not without pride. Within their ranks, hierarchies formed. Veterans commanded respect, newcomers sought to prove themselves, and rivalries simmered. Some gladiators became legends in their own time, their names whispered among the crowds, etched into walls, celebrated in graffiti. Victories earned adoration, gifts, and even the fleeting favor of the public. For men often born into obscurity, slaves, prisoners of war, condemned criminals, the arena offered a strange path to fame. Training was not only physical, but psychological. Gladiators rehearsed not just how to fight, but how to perform. The arena demanded spectacle. A duel was not merely a contest of strength, it was theater. Each swing of a sword, each clash of shield, carried meaning for the audience. Gladiators were taught to fight with style, to emphasize their blows, to fall with drama, to hold themselves with dignity even in defeat. In this, they were as much actors as warriors, embodying roles that resonated with Roman ideals of courage, honor, and endurance, and yet behind the stoic faces and the practiced stances, there were human beings with fears, hopes, and private longings. In the quiet hours, when the drills ended and torches burned low, men whispered of their homes, of families far away, of dreams that seemed impossibly distant. Some resigned themselves to their fate, embracing the life of the arena. Others clung desperately to hope, the hope of victory, the hope of freedom, the hope of surviving one more day. The training schools also bore witness to camaraderie. Bonds formed among men who fought side by side, shared meals, endured punishments, and faced the same uncertain future. The gladiator's life was brutal, but within its brutality, friendships grew, friendships forged in struggle, and tested in the sand of the arena. When the day of the games approached, preparation intensified. Weapons were sharpened, armor polished, and final drills completed. Gladiators often practiced in pairs, rehearsing moves that would soon be tested in real combat. Some men sought silence and prayer, appealing to the gods for strength. Others sought laughter and companionship, distracting themselves from the looming test. The night before the games was heavy with tension, a mixture of dread and anticipation, and when dawn arrived, the gladiators were led through the tunnels beneath the Colosseum, emerging into the blinding light of the arena. The crowd roared, and the men became more than themselves. They became instruments of spectacle, bearers of the empire's hunger for entertainment. In that moment, all the training, the discipline, the sweat, and the pain converged into a single performance, one that could end in triumph or in death. To be a gladiator was to live a life of contradictions. Strength and vulnerability, pride and despair, fame and slavery, hope and resignation, all coexisted in the hidden world behind the Colosseum's grand facade. To the spectators, they were warriors. To themselves, they were men enduring one of the harshest fates of Rome. And yet, without them, the Colosseum would have been an empty shell. It was their courage, their blood, their stories, that gave life to the stone amphitheater, that filled its walls with the echoes of glory and sorrow. The Colosseum was more than an amphitheater of stone and sand. It was a stage upon which emperors shaped their image, where power was performed as much as the gladiators' duels. For Rome, the games were never merely about blood or spectacle, they were about politics. They were about control. And above all, they were about the emperor. When a Roman emperor appeared at the Colosseum, he was not a man walking into a stadium. He was a godlike figure, framed against the marble and sunlight, descending into the gaze of tens of thousands of citizens. All eyes turned to him. The hum of conversation stilled. The games began not when the gladiators entered, but when the emperor took his seat. The emperor's box, the pulviner, stood directly above the arena floor, positioned so that no one could fail to see him. Lavishly decorated, often draped with silks, it marked him as the source of authority, the giver of the spectacle. To his left and right sat senators, priests, foreign envoys, and the most honored guests. The emperor's family often joined him, adding to the aura of dynastic continuity. Below, the common citizens stretched upward in admiration. Aware that the games they witnessed were gifts from the ruler himself, the games were called munera, duties or obligations. And in a sense, that is what they were, gifts the emperor owed to his people. Bread and circuses, food for the body, spectacle for the mind, were the currency of stability in Rome. An emperor who gave generous games was loved. An emperor who withheld them risked unrest. But the Colosseum was not just generosity, it was propaganda. Every beast slain, every criminal executed, every gladiator's duel won or lost, all reinforced the image of Rome's might. The arena mirrored the empire itself. The emperor presided as master of life and death, deciding with a gesture whether a fallen gladiator should be spared or slain. His decisions were visible to all. Mercy reflected his clemency. Death reflected his justice. The games became a mirror in which his power was reflected back, larger than life. Consider how the crowd reacted. When a gladiator fell, eyes turned not only to the victor, but upward to the emperor. The chant would rise, Mit, for mercy, or Jugula, for death. The emperor listened, but ultimately the choice was his. With a turn of the thumb, he could grant life or condemn to death. It was theater of authority, a reminder that in Rome, the emperor was the arbiter of fate. The politics of the games also extended beyond the arena floor. The very building of the Colosseum was political. Constructed by Vespasian and completed under Titus, it was funded by the spoils of war, specifically the conquest of Jerusalem in 70 CE to Roman citizens. The amphitheater was a monument to victory, proof of the empire's wealth and strength. It stood not only as entertainment but as a symbol of imperial triumph. Emperors knew this well. Titus inaugurated the Colosseum with 100 days of games. Wild beasts from every corner of the empire were displayed and killed. Lions, elephants, crocodiles, even exotic birds. Gladiators fought in endless contests. The sheer scale left no doubt. Rome was supreme, and Titus was its benefactor. Later emperors used the Colosseum as a backdrop for their rule. Domitian expanded the underground chambers, making the spectacles even more elaborate. Trajan hosted games said to have involved thousands of gladiators and tens of thousands of animals. Each emperor sought to outdo his predecessors, for to give more was to be remembered as greater. Yet the politics were not always straightforward. A generous emperor could win adoration, but a misstep could turn the crowd against him. The people of Rome were keen observers, sensitive to the smallest gestures. If the emperor seemed indifferent or stingy or cruel beyond reason, whispers of dissatisfaction could spread. The Colosseum was both gift and risk, a place where approval was earned, but where displeasure could erupt. Still, the image of the emperor as the benevolent giver of games endured. Citizens remembered the spectacles as proof of his care. Foreigners marveled at the scale, returning home with stories that reinforced Rome's dominance. The emperor himself became inseparable from the Colosseum, his name etched into the fabric of its history. And so the Colosseum was not just a monument of stone, it was a monument of power. To be a spectator was to participate in a ritual of loyalty, whether consciously or not. Every cheer reinforced the emperor's greatness. Every gasp at a gladiator's fall echoed his authority. Every day of games was another thread woven into the tapestry of Roman rule. When the sun set and the crowds departed, the emperor's presence lingered. The Colosseum remained a reminder that Rome was eternal, and that the man who ruled it was more than a ruler. He was the guardian of its glory. Asterisk, asterisk, to the modern imagination. The Colosseum is remembered for its blood, for the clash of swords, for the roars of lions, for the cries of the defeated. But to the Romans it was more than violence, it was theater. It was art, it was a stage upon which the empire itself performed. Every detail of a day at the games was crafted to move the crowd. The sound of trumpets announced the beginning, stirring the heart. The appearance of gladiators in gleaming armor dazzled the eye. The entrance of exotic beasts, never before seen by Roman citizens, filled the air with awe. What unfolded was not random, but choreographed, a carefully structured sequence of scenes designed to heighten emotion and then release it. The day began with venations, Beast hunts. Here, hunters in the arena faced animals imported from distant lands. Lions prowled, their golden coats shining in the sun. Leopards darted, swift and graceful. Elephants lumbered, strange and powerful. Crocodiles slid across constructed pools, their jaws snapping. These were not creatures of Italy. They were symbols of Rome's reach, proof that the empire extended to deserts, jungles, and mountains far beyond the horizon. To see such animals was itself a kind of wonder. Few spectators had ever traveled beyond their village, let alone seen beasts from Africa or Asia. The Colosseum brought the empire to them in living form. When hunters fought the animals, the display was not simply bloodshed. It was a performance of Rome's dominion over nature, a symbolic conquest played out. Before the eyes of all. Later came executions. Criminals, condemned to die, were sometimes forced into reenactments of myth. One might play the role of a tragic hero, meeting his end as the gods decreed. Others faced animals in cruel spectacles, their deaths both punishment and entertainment. It was grim but also theatrical, a way of transforming raw execution into narrative. In the Roman mind, the boundaries between justice and performance blurred. Then at last, the gladiators. The centerpiece of the day, their arrival was anticipated with restless energy. The crowd leaned forward. Children craned their necks. Merchants paused their selling. This was the moment all had come for. The gladiators marched in procession, saluting the emperor, their bodies gleaming with oil, their helmets shining in the sunlight. Each type carried distinctive armor, the retiarius with his net and trident, the secutor with his smooth helmet and short sword, the murmillo with his heavy shield and fish-crested helm. They were living archetypes, as recognizable to the Romans as modern athletes or actors are to us. The duels themselves were not chaos. They were carefully matched contests designed to be dramatic. A lightly armed fighter against a heavily armored one. A swift net wielder against a shielded swordsman. The contrast made the combat thrilling, unpredictable. It was not merely who would win, but how the styles would clash. And yet, though death was possible, not every match ended in it. Gladiators were valuable. They were trained professionals with months or years of preparation behind them. To lose too many was costly. So many fights ended with one fighter wounded, the other declared victor, the loser spared if he had fought bravely. The drama came less from death, and more from the suspense of not knowing what the emperor would decree. As the day wore on, the spectacles grew in grandeur. Some events featured elaborate sets, forests of painted scenery, even mock ships and staged naval battles. The arena floor could be flooded for water displays, then drained again for combat. The ingenuity was astounding, a feat of engineering, as much as entertainment. It was theater on the largest possible scale, and the audience? They did not merely watch, they participated. They shouted advice, roared approval, booed when displeased. They gestured with their hands, voices rising as one, pressing for mercy or for blood. The games were a dialogue between performers and spectators, each feeding the other's energy. What made it all so powerful was not just the violence, but the artistry of the arrangement. A Roman spectator did not think of it as chaos. They thought of it as order, as beauty, as a reflection of the empire itself, vast, diverse, mighty, and carefully balanced. The Colosseum was a mirror. It reflected Rome's values, Rome's might, Rome's imagination. It was not just about what happened on the sand. It was about what those events meant. And what they meant was simple, that Rome ruled all. That Rome endured all. That Rome would last forever. As the sun lowered and the shadows grew, the day's spectacles ended. Citizens rose, weary yet exhilarated, their minds filled with images of bravery, of beasts, of emperors, of victory. They carried these memories home, to be retold in taverns and households, spreading the story of Rome's greatness again and again. Thus, the games were not only seen, they were remembered. They were lived. They were retold. And so, the Colosseum's theater extended far beyond its walls, echoing across the empire, shaping the way Rome saw itself. The Colosseum dazzled with its public displays. But behind those walls of marble and stone, in barracks and training grounds, lived the men who made the games possible. The gladiators dot to the Roman crowd. They were heroes, villains, and entertainers all at once. But their daily lives were far from glamorous. Most began their journey not by choice, but by fate. Many were prisoners of war, taken from distant lands, and forced into slavery. Others were criminals, condemned to the arena as punishment. And some, though fewer, entered voluntarily, drawn by the promise of fame, food, or fortune. These men were housed in ludi gladiatori gladiator schools. The largest and most famous of these was the Ludus Magnus, located just east of the Colosseum itself. Its remains can still be seen today, crumbling but enduring, a silent echo of what once was. Within the Ludus, life was rigid, disciplined, and controlled. The men slept in small cells, sometimes alone, sometimes two to a room. The walls were bare, the bed simple. Their days followed strict routines: morning training, midday meals, afternoon drills, evening rest. Training was relentless. They practiced with wooden swords before graduating to real ones. They learned to move with balance, to strike with precision, to endure the weight of armor for hours at a time. Each man was drilled in the specific style of gladiator assigned. To him, the Murmillo learned the heavy shield and short sword. The Retiarius practiced casting nets and thrusting with a trident. The Secutor was taught to charge, shield forward, chasing down his lightly armed opponent. It was not random combat. It was an art form, a discipline, a science. The Lanista, the trainer, guided the men with both cruelty and care. He was both master and mentor, feared yet respected, for he held their fates in his hands, and he alone could prepare them for survival. Food was plentiful compared to what common peasants might eat. The diet of gladiators was surprisingly heavy in grains and beans, designed to build mass and stamina rather than lean muscle. They were sometimes called horderi, barley men, because of their reliance on simple but filling meals. Strong bodies endured longer in the arena, and endurance mattered more than elegance. But though food was provided, freedom was not. The men lived under guard. They could not come and go as they pleased. Escape was difficult and punishment severe. For all the excitement of the games, their daily reality was closer to imprisonment. Yet within these walls, bonds formed. Men trained side by side, suffered together, and often fought knowing only one could emerge alive. Some friendships became legendary, whispered of in Roman tales. Others ended tragically, with comrades forced to face one another in combat. The paradox of gladiator life was stark. Despised as slaves, yet adored as stars. Their names chanted by thousands, their images carved on lamps and walls. Roman women admired them, even lusted after them, leaving graffiti that confessed affection for famous fighters. And yet, at end of the day, most remained property, commodities to be bought, sold, or discarded. Still, for some, the arena offered opportunity. A slave who fought bravely might earn rewards, even manumission, freedom. Some gladiators gained such fame that their lives were spared again and again, becoming living legends, icons of courage. Their likenesses were painted, their victories recorded, their reputations spreading beyond Rome.